Hi, everyone, and welcome to the weekly Chance Talk webcast that Sam Savage and I have been doing for a few weeks now. And you can find all previous episodes at the Risk Academy YouTube channel or in LinkedIn. So today, in the kind of spirit of continuing discussing the lame excuses for not quantifying uncertainty, we're up to the second excuse, which is my quantitative model might not be right. Sam, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, well, first of all, this is the very genesis of the list. So Doug says this is the exupero ursus fallacy. He put it into Latin. Okay. Doug and I were telling this same stupid joke about exactly this topic to each of our consulting clients without knowing it. When I heard that he was telling the same joke, I said, well, we've got to do a list. Okay, so two hikers are being tracked by a hungry bear when one pulls a pair of track shoes out of his backpack. And the other guy says, you can't outrun a bear. And he says, I don't need to outrun the bear. I just need to outrun you. So you don't need to outrun reality. You need to outrun the person who doesn't have a model. You have to outrun modeling with intuition alone. And so when I heard, again, we were both telling this joke. Doug is the one who gave it a Latin name, the exupero ursus fallacy, which means outrunning the bear. But this is what prompted me to do the list. And my own comment here is, see, my quantitative model might not be right. Right. And so George Bach said all models are wrong, but some models are useful. And then Doug says the corollary to Bach is some models have been shown to be measurably more useful than others. But look, here's another way of looking at it. I'm not going to learn arithmetic because someone might give me a wrong number. Like, oh, I was trying to add 2 plus 5 to get 7, but someone gave me a 3, so I got 8. Don't blame the arithmetic. Blame the person who gave you the wrong number. And that is the perfect segue into the
Well,
great okay.
let's talk about a little bit more about this because I have a lot of personal stories associated
Oh
with
yeah, fire away.
beat the bear fallacy. It's an anecdote that after reading it in Doug's book, I told to probably every executive who would listen. And some appreciated, some obviously didn't. But it's very real, and I think it's a very illustrative example of showing that um, sure, the model that we're building right now may not be perfect, nor it was ever designed to be perfect. In fact, one of my principles in risk management implementation is MVP, which means build a quick snapshot MVP model to test the hypothesis. And if you kind of get evidence that you're moving in the right direction, then you can improve and enhance the model in the model later. But the first takeaway, the first conclusion is usually based on a very high level, unsophisticated model, and that's more than sufficient to realize that you're moving in the right direction. So that is such an important point. We're never trying to build the perfect model for the reality. We're always competing against yesterday's practices for making the same decision. So if we just made, and this is just how ridiculous it is. If you literally just switched from deterministic investment decision model or deterministic budget or a business plan to like 2 or 3 Perth distributions, technically speaking, it's already better than it was yesterday. And then you can kind of improve gradually every year showing that your modeling performance is greater. Obviously, executives are not going to let you do that because they want everything and immediately. But this is a very, very, very important message. And what I also discovered, and this was kind of absolute surprise to me, is that often the market makes pricing decisions based on wrong models or suboptimal models or incomplete models. And for example, in insurance, what I discovered for many corporate lines, the way actuaries and underwriters price the risk is actually based on pretty unsophisticated, pretty kind of kindergarten models for some of the insurance types, especially for some of the newer liability insurances, because they haven't really built the right model yet. There's no industry standard for that. And what we've discovered is we had to scale back our models to match what the market had, because it made no sense to model a certain risk better than the market models, because they price you on this simple kind of incomplete version. And if you want to come back to them and say, well, this is what we think is the fair price, then you have to play along the market rules.
But this is a beautiful case of, you don't have to beat the bear, you just have to beat the market. Beating the
Yes.
market is known as getting filthy rich.
Yes, exactly.
I mean,
This is what I've discovered. Yeah, it's actually beating the bear may be even more difficult than beating the market sometimes. Sometimes
well,
it's
no, of
actually
course,
much
yeah,
easier.
yeah, yeah, yes. Well, and it depends on the market. But I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
look. In 1974, I started teaching at the University of Chicago Business School. One of the people in the faculty there that I got to know was Myron Scholes of the Black-Scholes options equation. One of the most brilliant pieces of applied mathematics of the 20th century. And those guys, it was Myron Scholes, Fisher Black, who unfortunately passed away before he got the Nobel Prize, and Robert Merton. Those three guys came up with an analytical solution for a particular variety of the flaw of averages. That was, you can't predict the value of a stock option based on the average value of the stock. No, you need to add the volatility of the stock, which is the distribution of the stock. And what did they do? They played the options markets. And they ultimately made a ton of money because the markets weren't using the Black-Scholes equation, and they were. Is the Black-Scholes equation perfect? No, far from it.
Yeah.
Did it beat the market? Absolutely.
Yeah,
And they
yeah,
got
yeah.
rich. So, listen, going back, you said something just completely triggered a whole shtick of mine. You say, look, we start with this minimally viable
Yeah. Model,
model. I want to share my screen here for a second.
please do.
Um, okay. And I'm sorry, this isn't centered because this is something I use in my green screen where I put it in a corner of the screen. Okay. How to draw a face. We're not building a model now. How to draw a face. Wrong. You don't start with a nose. Right. You start with like a circle.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't look anything like a face. How to design an airplane. Wrong. Right. A paper airplane. Okay, now this was formalized. Just precisely what you were talking about, Alex, was formalized by a famous computer scientist at Stanford named Donald Knuth. How to build a model. And by the way, I'm a pretty easygoing guy. There's only one thing I am religious about, and it's this. So here are the 5 steps of modeling. It's the only thing that I am completely doctrinaire about. 1, decide what you want to do. 2, decide how to do it. 3, do it. 4, debug it. 5, trash steps 1 through 4 because now you know what you really wanted in the first place.
Yes, that is so true. Every prototype that I started, like every prototype of a model that I started with, I ended up, doing something completely different for the decision at the end.
But you learn from it. It's the value of information. And this, of course, is Doug's whole shtick. Life is uncertain. So what do? Well, you analyze, you try to figure out which uncertainty is the most valuable to learn more about.
Yep.
And then you learn more about it. And then you go to the next step.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The only last point I have on this is that people that usually say that the model that we're building may not be right are the ones that prefer intuition and qualitative kind of risk scoring methodologies. And so I always like to say is that when you're trying to build a quantitative model, it will definitely be not a true representation of reality. It will be a simplified version, and I think what they really mean is that it may not lead to the right kind of conclusion or the right decision. And my joke is always the quantitative model may not lead to the kind of optimal decision. But if you're using intuition and qualitative models, you know it will not lead to optimal
Yeah.
decision or solution. So it's a kind of a choice of giving quantitative a chance or knowingly and purposefully deceiving the decision makers into believing something that is not true.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And again, this we said this in our last session that when Eisenhower talked about military planning, right? Plans are nothing. They don't ever play out. Oh, planning is everything. We we spent a year planning the Normandy invasion, right? Which meant we thought about everything. And another way of putting it is that modeling is a journey, not a destination. People get this so wrong. When will my model be done? That's like saying, when will my kid be done? No, you don't want your kid to be done. You want your kid to be growing, learning, interacting with you, being a kid, and then growing up. No, no, you know. So I think
Yep.
this is a huge um, benefit of the probability management approach that we're all describing here, because it brings the ability to model to the decision maker. They don't need to be a statistician or what you would call a generator of probability. They don't need to do that. They can interact anyway. And just the spreadsheet itself, because of its interactive nature. I remember before spreadsheets, people just didn't experiment. The whole thing was, what if? Well, what if sales are only this? What if sales are that? It was very seductive for a good reason. Got people modeling and understanding and shaking the ladder. I will say, just going back to spreadsheets.
Yep.
So if you've read the foreword to my book, The Flaw of Averages, you will know the one thing that my father and I have in common in our academic backgrounds. He was a very famous statistician, worked with Milton Friedman and others. And the one thing that we have in common in our academic backgrounds is that we both flunked out of the University of Michigan. And when I flunked out, I became an automobile mechanic and raced a car. And I will tell you, I learned so much by being a mechanic. You turn this gear, and it turns this gear, and this belt turns, and this thing moves over here. It taught me to investigate. And that's what you should be doing with your models.
Yep.
It's not that
with your decisions through models.
Exactly. And
Yep.
and I think again we can segue maybe to Stuart's thing now, right?
Yeah,
Because that was
let's.
great what you said. So we had a viewer who is concerned with the issue of, okay, look, you guys are telling us get your distributions from what Alex calls a generator. And by the way, sooner or later we need a word for this. I would maybe call him a statistician. When I use the word generator, I often mean a mathematical random number generator. But Alex is using it in the following context. If probability were electricity, then some people generate electricity and some people use it in their light bulbs, right? And the first thing is think about how we use electricity. Sometimes I plug my lamp or computer into the wall. Sometimes I go to the supermarket and I buy AA batteries. Oh, sometimes I buy AAA batteries. Then I'm deciding what kind of electricity I need.
Mm-hmm.
Do it all. Do it all. But let me give you some contexts where you absolutely must have the generator. There's more to it than just knowing what kind of distribution to use.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to know how all the interrelationships. So I've got a bunch of different contracts involving petroleum prices. Oh, well, we'll in our big organization, we'll all settle on the same distribution. We'll use a log normal distribution of oil price. No, that's not enough. Because now in my simulation, on trial one, oil's $100 a barrel, and in Alex's, it's $50 a barrel. That's incoherent. So there are places where you need coherent modeling across the organization. And just a great example without probability. Someone has to pick a discount rate for all the net present value calculations. NPV means $1 a year from now is not worth as much as $1 today.
Yep.
If you don't understand that concept, I refer you to the $1 million lottery that gives you $1 a year for 1,000,000 years, right? And by the way, with normal discount rates, that thing's worth, I don't know, $20,000 as you discount it over time. Okay. But if everybody could choose their own discount rate, then if I am managing costs over time,
Yep.
oh yes, I'm discounting these 100% a year. So I'm paying out $1 million a year, but next year it's like only worth $1. I mean, that's only the cost of $1. And if I'm managing revenues, I put in a discount rate of 0. Oh yeah, we're earning $1 a year for 1,000,000 years. So who picks the discount rate? There's a name for that person. The chief financial officer, the CFO.
Yep, exactly. That's a very good analogy.
And
Everyone uses it, but somebody has to make a decision on what it will be for the rest of the company.
Exactly. Well, and who decides not just the distribution, but the SIP, the actual trials we're going to use for the price of oil? That's the chief probability officer, the CPO. And it's one of the oldest memes of probability management. And I learned this from a guy on an airplane flying to London years ago. I was describing the role of this person, and he said, oh, well, that would be the chief probability officer. I said, you're right. So going back to Stuart Kramer's question about, well, so, okay, do I have to get all my distributions from the CPO? No. It's like arithmetic. Do I have to get all my numbers from the CFO? No, we trade numbers around. But when it comes to corporate decisions that involve portfolios of things, you need that coordination. And
yeah.
And not only that, but I mean, don't think of, well, every organization's got a CPO and they're generating all these distributions in here and that's all there is. No, there should be corporations that sell distributions.
Yep.
And they're
That
better at it than you
generate,
are.
look after the quality. Yeah, exactly. Back
They know
test.
what they're talking about. You don't. There are companies. You tell me how many yards of concrete you're pouring, or square meters, or whatever we'd call it, of concrete. Yeah, there are companies that will tell you the average cost of pouring 100 yards of concrete.
Yep.
Is that with or without rebar? They'll give you the cost. Well, those companies should be giving you the distributions. And there should be a whole industry in that.
Yep. In fact, which is very interesting that you mentioned that, because when making large investment decisions or M&A decisions, when you're purchasing, for example, we were purchasing chemical plants across Europe, and when you make such important decisions, you employ due diligence companies to provide you analysis and investigate and generate all sorts of reports. And what I've discovered many years ago is that these due diligence companies employ tax accountants, lawyers, financial accountants, engineers, environmental engineers, highly specialized, some of the best experts in their set fields. And by default, they provide averages as estimates. So I started asking them for ranges and distributions, and they had no trouble providing that data to me because they already have that. So they're saying, okay,
Exactly.
your expense growth could be higher, and I'm saying, how high could it be? What's the uncertainty around the difference in growth? Is it 3 to 7%? What's the range? And most of them were actually able to give us the ranges, no problem whatsoever, which allowed us to then plug it into our investment models, run the Monte Carlo, and get the proper distribution.
Well, so hold on a second, Alex. Now let's go back to mergers and acquisitions. Buying what? Buying fertilizer plants? Buying what?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So now, and what are the raw ingredients in fertilizer? Remind me, potash or something?
Yeah, potash or ammonia gas, basically just
I don't even know what the heck it is, but they have prices.
gas. Natural gas is one of the biggest and
Natural
kind of the
gas.
most
Fine,
common.
fine, fine.
Yeah.
So now let me explain. Alex is thinking of purchasing 3 fertilizer companies. And he goes to these people, and I don't want just the average price of gas or the average price of ammonia or the average price of potash. I don't even know what that is. I've just heard the term. Sounds like I know what I'm talking about. So I don't want those averages. I want the distributions. The distributions are not enough. So suppose they give Alex 3 log normal distributions, and
Uh-huh.
Alex just goes in and simulates each of the 3 plants he's thinking of buying. That ain't going to work. He needs the same trial, the same value of the trial on each one. So, and I think we need to follow up with a discussion of this, showing how this portfolio approach works, right? I know we can do it, and that, so here's the deal. If suppose they give him the distributions, well, Alex isn't done. Then Alex has to play the role of a chief probability officer. And this is what they're going to do. They're going to say, oh, what is the statistical interdependence between natural gas, ammonia, and potash? Well, you can get that out of the data. That's not rocket science. Then Alex needs to generate 3 interdependent SIPs, one for gas, one for ammonia, and one for potash. But they've got to be coherent. They've got to be, you have to preserve the statistical relationships. That is, they're not just 3 SIPs anymore. They are a stochastic library unit with relationships preserved, or a slurp. He then, and you could have 3 separate teams modeling each of the companies, the firms, the manufacturing plants. You're the CPO. You give each of them a slurp. They then run a good model of their operations all using the same slurp. And by the way, if there are any other global factors, you need to get those to them. But let's just assume it's these three prices.
Yep.
Now we have sips coming out of those three plants. You just add them up, and that's the sip of your portfolio. Or you add them up to it. Well, which put little check boxes. I want this guy and that guy, but not that guy. Okay, now here's a question.
Yeah, yeah. No, Malcolm is just making a point that the due diligence providers are not as good as they claim to
Yeah,
be.
right.
Which, yeah, no doubt, but it's not really critical to the point we're trying to make, because the point we're trying to make, there are providers, external providers, that trust their reputation, that they have some reputation to protect at least. They're currently giving you all the single point estimates. There's absolutely nothing stopping everyone in the market demanding ranges instead of single point estimates as the
I
first
love
step.
free enterprise. Alex and I can get into this business, start providing stochastic libraries, right? We have not outrun reality, but these other people are going to get eaten by the bear if we're, you know,
Yeah,
if
well, that is actually exactly the point. Even if we knew very little from publicly available information and we converted them into distributions, which would be pretty far off from good distributions, we would be still better off than single point estimates.
yeah, it's often the interrelationship that is more important than the distribution itself.
Yeah, no, that's very true.
And it's one of the things you can test, by the way. You can try, well, what if I use a Weibull instead of a log number? Log number. Well, I mean, well, see what would happen. Oh, it doesn't make much difference, does it? I use this concept of a drunk wandering back and forth on a busy highway. His average position is the center line. That means that the state of the drunk at his average position is alive, but on average, he's dead. Oh, yeah, but you haven't told me the distribution yet. It doesn't matter. He's dead. Right. Now, if he's sober, if he's stone sober,
Yeah.
and at some point, Alex, I'd like to break to that marketing funnel example, because there,
Yep. Whatever you want.
for like the first time here, I've got an example where you really can quantify the degree of uncertainty and a way. So the degree to which we're going to model uncertainty is like how much faster the track shoes are going to make us versus the person who doesn't, right?
Yeah.
And
Do share the screen. I'll
yeah,
tell a little story in the meantime.
yeah.
I was once modeling the business plan for a solar generation plant, and it was one of the biggest companies in the country responsible for solar generation. And what we,
Solar, like solar power.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
They were building solar parks,
yeah.
and the result of our modeling, I've never had this in my life. We've run 10,000 trials, and every single one of the 10,000 trials said that the company will go bankrupt. Like there was no upside. There was no
Yeah.
no positive scenario at all. It was horrible. And the only difference was the company was going to go bankrupt, and it's a multi-billion-dollar company. And the company was going to go bankrupt in either like 2 months or 3 months or 6 months. So obviously that didn't matter, because once everybody realized that the company was under huge threat of going bankrupt, it actually didn't matter whether it was going to happen tomorrow or the day after. Something had to be done. And so the country, the legislation for the tariffs for solar power ended up being changed in the country, because that was the only thing that could have saved the industry basically. So yeah, that was quite fascinating.
Yeah. Well, so um, recently I've been exposed to some people who are building marketing models, and I worked on this with my colleague Matthew Rafelson. And there is typically something called a marketing funnel, which I'm telling you, it opened up some new insights for me. But here's what a marketing funnel might look like. There's a mailing list we can buy for $500,000. And, well, 10% of the people that we mail are going to visit our site. And then 50% of those will visit the products page, and 40% will visit the shopping cart and purchase. So the funnel boils down to a conversion rate of 2%, 10 times 50 times 40. And my colleague Matthew looks at this and says, wait a minute, this is like my hiring funnel. So we send out newspaper ads, we interview so many people, so many pass the next stage, so many pass to the next stage, right? And then we end up with so many people. Well, so are you completely certain about these numbers? Of course not, but I'm just presenting it to you. No, it's our best guess, 10, 50, 40, and that leads to 2%. Well, 2% of 5 million people is 100,000. Oh, great. That means that on average, we will have a demand of 100,000. And that is true, we will. And so let's think about how to plan for this. The product costs $25. We know we can sell them for $40. So we have the demand of 100,000. We order 100,000, and then we sell 100. $4 million is our revenue, and if you subtract off the cost of goods sold, that is at $25, we're left with $1.5 million. Now that's before I take off the cost of the list. Okay, so then I define something here, but I don't. This isn't my idea. There's return on ad spend, ROAS. So we spent 500,000. We brought in $1.5 million. So that's 3 times return. That's 300%. Okay, now what if you were uncertain about these numbers? Oh, and let me just point something out. If demand is less than 100,000, say 90,000, well, you're not going to make your numbers. We only have a profit of 600,000. On the other hand, if demand is greater, oh, you don't make any more? No, because sales are the minimum of whatever you ordered and whatever the demand was. So there is no upside. Got it. Now let's look at the uncertainties over here. So you're not certain, are you, about the about those numbers? Hold on. So look, let's go. Let me start with the most uncertain case. And how would I know how uncertain I am? I'd ask a statistician or a generator. So let's assume that our uncertainty in the percentage of visits looks like this. Make it a little bigger. It looks like this. Oh yeah, on average it's 10%. Our uncertainty in the people visiting the products page looks like this. Yeah, on average it's 50%. 40% go onto the shopping cart on average. And lo and behold, because these are statistically independent, the average here is the conversion, overall conversion is truly 2%. But look at the shape of the distribution. There's almost a 60% chance we will be less than 2%. So suppose I'm selling this to a client. And what happens to the profit when we run this through our sales figure? Oh no, we don't get $1 million. on average, we get 61,000. I mean, it's like that's not close enough for government work. Just watch what happens as we make things less uncertain. And every click here is like, well, you'll see. It's basically, you can just see these distributions narrow and narrow and narrow, and the average profit is going up, right? And I'll go up to complete certainty, which is what you were implying, by the way, when you just showed me the numbers. Okay. Oh, yeah, we're completely certain. Great. Now basically you're going to get, this should really be 100% here. You're going to get your 2%. Our average profit is $1 million. And so now let's go back to the original uncertainty. Now, I distinguish between the strong form of the law of averages and the weak form of the law of averages. And the strong form is that if you plug the average demand into your profit formula, you get $1 million, but on average, you get 62 million, which is, 62,000. It's like 6%. It's like ridiculous. You don't get the average right. With the weak form, you get the average right, but you miss the distribution. So yes, the conversion rate is on average 2%, but you get a ridiculous distribution. But it's worse than that. You are guaranteed to get a skewed distribution. That means you are guaranteed that the chance is less than 50%, or the chance is greater than 50% that you will be below 2%. It's another inequality. And I'm sure there's a name for it. I'll have to look it up, but I'll give it my own name pretty soon. But just a second. In the land of the averages, you buy this information, say, oh, good, 2% chance, 2% conversion rate. Then you go off and you end up making $61,000, which is what you should expect to make. But you didn't. You thought you'd make $1 million. And so you go back and you sue. Alex gave you these numbers. You sue Alex, and Alex says, well, wait a minute. I can prove mathematically that your average conversion rate was 2%. And you lose your case. No. But now I come in as a statistical expert on your side. I say, wait a minute. If there's uncertainty, and this much uncertainty, which Alex knew about but didn't tell you about, I can show there's like a 60% chance you would have been less than 2%. And I'm sorry, Alex, you lose the case. If you sold something as being 2% when there was a 60% chance to be less, I don't care about the average. I win it on the basis of chance, right? So let me go back here to this model. And so we're going to use chance calc and say, I've got two ad buys, by the way. There's one ad buy that has half the uncertainty, but that list is more expensive. It's $525. Let's start with the first ad buy. So I'm going to open a local library. I'm going to go to ad buy 1 sales forecast. I'm going to stick it in here. We're not in Kansas anymore, as we say. And see our previous video about where that comes from. The Wizard of Oz movie. Okay. And then, well, let me just see what I make on average, right? So I'm using chance calc now, right? So on average, I make 61,000, whatever. Okay. Oh, look at my net return here. Let's see what I make on average over here. What is my return on ad spend? Oh, 112%, not 300%. I'm making 12% of my money instead of 200% of my money. Okay. Now, just a minute. I want to try the other ad buy. Well, the other ad buy had the same average of 2%. It's got less uncertainty, but it costs $5.25. Well, if I don't look at the uncertainties, of course I'm not going to buy that one. But now I am looking at the uncertainties. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to open the local library and I'm going to go to add by to forecast library. Oh my gosh, on average, I make almost $536,000 instead of $62,000. And my return on that thing is like 200% or 100% difference, right? Rather than the 12%. So why aren't companies selling these? They should be. And then you see, that would be, if we go back to Stuart's question about, am I going to the network or not? There are many networks. You're not going to your corporate network. You're going to some marketing company that sells these. And then that means that they are statistically coherent within whatever they sell. But if I'm just going out to them and they use the wrong seed in the random number generator, well, then when I go over and look at potash prices, I might discover that just because they use the wrong seed, actual demand or whatever this is completely correlated to potash prices. No, not going to happen, because Doug Hubbard's generator has an entity field. So the marketing company has a unique entity, 1547. The chemical price company has its own unique field. It's unique entity. It's like 230. Well, you change those things, and then the simulations are not going to collide. So there's just so much exciting stuff. And I am looking forward to exploring these examples in more detail. I think what really opened my eyes was, here's a case of the weak form of the law of averages, where you're guaranteed to skew the distribution. And that is another, you can really get someone for fiduciary malfeasance, I think, in that case, right? Because you could argue I gave him the right average. But if the distribution is skewed, I'm going to get you on the odds. As long as you can say, well, there's a 50-50 chance. It's uncertain. We knew that. 50-50 chance, greater or less than. I think you win the case. As soon as I come and say, no, 60-40 case, it went in your direction, I think you lose the case. So I'm really interested in exploring this. And I do need to run to another meeting. Alex, any last words here before we get off?
No questions from the participants who are watching us now. I'll stick around and answer any questions or collect them for our next week's session. Don't miss the next session. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to get the notifications. Thanks, Sam. And more on that during the Risk Awareness Week. Do check out the agenda for the Risk Awareness Week 2022, which has been updated. So it's now online.
Okay. So long, everybody.
Thanks, Sam. Speaks to you next week. So we are live. Any questions, thoughts? I have a few things that I wanted to share. It's end of month. Tomorrow is the last day. As you probably know, risk awareness is happening in October. And there are two options to participate. There's a free access option, which you're more than welcome to choose. And there's a full access option with CPD credits and everything else that you that you like. The prices for the paid full access CPD version gets increased at the end of each month. So if you're gonna upgrade anyway, and if you're gonna purchase the full access, you might as well do that today or tomorrow, because otherwise it will be $50 more than it was. Um, Now, next thing, if you are in US, I will be in Miami at the Archer Summit in September, mid-September, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st, 21st of September. If you want to come and say hello, join me, ask me questions, participate in the event, here's the link, or just Google Archer Summit 2022. I just published a fun game um, together with Archer in preparation for that event. We published a fun game. See if you can answer the questions and get your presentation. It's not really risk presentation, it's kind of risk analysis for the decision makers at the board. See if you can beat the game. And a quick reminder that all the Risk Awareness Week workshops from 2020 are now available completely free on the YouTube channel that you're either watching, or if you're watching on LinkedIn or Facebook, then on Risk Academy YouTube channel. Um, Enjoy. In a year's time, 2021 will become available, and then in 2 years' time, 2022 will become available, and so on. The reason why I kind of feel quite comfortable releasing the videos 2 years after the actual event is because most of the workshops are quite timeless. Because I rewatch some of the videos from 2019 still, and they're just as relevant today as they were in 19. We still talk about SIPs, SIDS, LERPs, correlations, building models. Risk management just doesn't change that fundamentally. Unfortunately, I wish there was kind of more um, new innovation. Um, so, any questions? Any thoughts? Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Aaron, for supporting the Risk Awareness Week. I'll be there. Any other questions, thoughts, any topics you want covered? Risk Awareness Week has 5 days, each of the 5 days with a different theme. Which theme is like what day are you looking forward to? Let me know. And if no more questions, then I thank you for being with us, and I'll see you next week. Bye.